Anyway, back under the tree. We've spent a lot of time on that one. We've got 2 more before the next break. Next up in our Christmas list is Ben Griffis coming in with his thoughts.
Hey everybody, what I want for K-League Miss is for managers to maybe play at a little bit faster passing tempo when in possession of the ball. I think this could be really valuable to teams to be able to stretch the opposition defense a little bit better, a little bit more maybe. If you go left to right, maybe you'd also try to bait the entire opposition defense to go towards the right flank, and then you can push out to the left flank a lot faster. You can get into the final third more. You can get in the final third faster as well. I think that technically we're able to do that with the players we have right now in the K-League. I mean, we have defenders and midfielders that are really good on the ball, whether it's, quickly if they have to make a decision quickly or if they have more time. And I think we also have a lot of attackers that can drop in an impact play as well. I think that tactically this would be really good because the opposition defenders might not be used to defending at such a high speed. If they're pressing, they're the ones initiating that fast tempo, but if they're having to react to such a faster tempo than what we've seen in the past couple seasons, that could spread them even further, and it could be really dangerous for a manager that decides to do this. I think it would really help not just their team, but also the league. The goals scored would be, I think, a little bit higher. Technically, I think players would develop more because they'd have less time on the ball to make decisions, not because they're pressed as much maybe, but because they're asked to do everything at a higher tempo. So I think that that's what I want for K-League Miss. I think it is a really interesting component that we haven't seen to the extent that we see in Japan or that we see in Germany right now, that these long possession chains would be at such a fast pace, and to have players just be at 100% all the time. I really am hoping that we can see that in 2024.
Ben Griffis there coming in with his thoughts on K-League football. And yeah, Ben, obviously he's great with all the stats. Some of the graphs he puts out on Twitter and his tactical pieces as well are intriguing. And he makes a good, intriguing point there with tactical analysis, talking about faster tempo. He is preaching to the choir somewhat, and I may have to oppose him just to give us some balance. But Andrew, anything to add to Ben's thoughts there before we do?
Yeah, I find it interesting. It's not connected to the first question we talked about with the foreign quota, but it does tie back into that a little bit. A couple of times he mentioned Japan and that, and I know, like I mentioned before on the podcast, and I mentioned it probably to both you guys in passing too, but I think I saw Kachki's first game for Suwon. It was either against Pohang or Daegu, and by the end of the game, they were just chanting his name because he was doing exactly what Ben said there. It was just instead of the kind of typical 1 yard sideways pass, give and go, that you see a lot from some of the K League midfielders. He had a range of passing along the ground and in the air, short and long. That was brilliant to watch. It was breathtaking stuff. Actually, it was one of the better debuts I'd seen in this league, and that is a way, obviously, of just getting the ball quicker to your attackers. And if you've got like I know Kim Ji Chan was probably, but I'm not sure if he's playing, but either way, but that's the kind of young guy that you want to have up front as well, who can exploit all that. I agree totally. I just think there's a lot of sameness when you watch some of the K League teams, and sometimes the build up is a little bit slow, and there's a lot of touches in around the halfway line. But I like when you see one of those, and it's not just a foreign player, it's not just a Japanese player. When you see a guy who's able to spread passes like that, really good ball control, can pick out a good pass, it just makes the game much more interesting. Obviously, you don't want everybody to do it because you want to have a little bit more variety. But I think it was a good point. I think it would just make the games a little bit more interesting. And if you've Gerso Fernandez playing up front, I'm not saying Incheon are guilty of this, but if you've a guy like Gerso up front, you would have thought that getting the ball to him as quickly as possible is exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah. Paul, anything to add?
My instinct here is to pass it straight back to you. But no, what I will say actually is about what Andrew said there about Kazuki, is that the Japanese midfielders, the Koreans play in 4-4 time, right? The Japanese players are in sort of 5-4 jazz sort of thing. They're on a different time signature than the other players. So maybe we're kind of contradicting ourselves a bit by not increasing the foreign quota, or certainly by not by making sure that we keep the AFC quota, because I think we need that a little bit. I think the Korean midfielder instinctively just goes from side to side.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's more about how these players are coached, isn't it? You know, like it goes back to grassroots level. You have to sort of get some coaches who have been abroad and learn how to coach abroad. Like, for example, the new Suwon FC manager, Kim Jung, he was coaching in Europe for a few years. He was with Tubize in Belgium, if I am saying that correctly. So you might see a different type of sort of approach from people like him, because he has had that education in Europe. But I think it's something that needs to go back to, you know, grassroots level. There's this thing where, you know, you don't want to give the ball away, or you don't want to take a risk, because if you take a risk, it's like you've done something wrong, right? It's like a cultural thing, perhaps. But if you just take that risk, it needs to be taught to players from a very, very early age. So, yeah, I would love to see that, but I think it's more about the coaching philosophy, really.
Yeah, there does need to be a little bit of work, just from the ground up. It'd take years, perhaps, to really get that a shift across the league. But a couple of smart appointments by a team or two could really, brighten up the league and things. But I mean, also, for balance, variety is the spice of life, and I quite like it when K-League teams kick a J-League team in the Champions League, because I don't think K-League teams would do that well otherwise against them.
Yeah,
I think a J-League side
fair.
would probably, if there wasn't that element, it might not be as competitive. But hey, it doesn't matter. Let's see how many Champions League trophies there still are in Korea.
Who cares about the Champions League?
Banging that drum, doesn't matter.
Not in Saudi Arabia. We're not.
Doesn't matter.
Anyway, but no, that was a great argument from Ben. I'm probably going to say that gets granted, along with Alex's earlier, which we didn't really say. Anyway, Paul.